Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favourite Greek myths, and one of the most well-known ones, the Trials of Midas. Now, this story's been told in a fair few different ways, and today I'll be reading it from a book, because I don't know it well enough to tell you, but I'll be throwing in some of my own flavour as well. Now, here follows the tale of the unfortunate Midas, king of Thrace, who liked to speak without thinking first, and who landed himself in a great deal of trouble. It was always known that Midas would one day be rich. When he was but a baby in a cradle, a stream of ants was seen carrying grains of corn and placing them between his sleeping lips. Such a portent, the soothsayers foretold, meant only one thing: the baby was destined for fabulous wealth. Now, I have heard this a different way, when he was always in a destitute land, and through his wiles he made it rich, but we'll see. When he was grown to manhood, Midas planted a famous rose garden around his palace, and into this perfumed plot one day rolled an elderly and rather effeminate figure, Selenos by name. Selenos was the tutor of the goatish Dionysus, the wild god of wine and divine intoxication and revelry. On this occasion, the aged reveller was partaken too joyously of the god's ecstatic draught, and had broken away from the crowd to sleep it off in Midas's garden, among the scent of musk and honey. This was where the king's gardeners found him, with petals for his pillows and roses in his hair, and immediately brought him before their master. Midas welcomed Selenos, and found him, now sober, a most amusing guest. Now this is where we have our first break from tradition. In this story, Selenos proved to be an accomplished weaver of tales, and entertained the king and company with a gossamer web of fables and fancies, which told of a vast continent beyond the ocean with magnificent cities in which giants dwelt, and of the trees with magical fruit that could reverse the process of aging, so that whoever ate them became younger and younger, until finally they reached the moment of their own birth, and vanished into nothingness. These were the marvels of which Selenos spoke, and with each he entertained the court for 5 full days and nights. At last, however, Midas realized that the old tutor should rejoin his divine pupil, and sent him, accompanied by servants, after Dionysus. Now I've heard another version, where he was found in the flower beds, but no one knew who he was. But due to the Greek tradition of xenia, which is hospitality, he was forced to take him into his household, as Midas observed the traditions of the gods. And then Selenos tortured him for 5 days and nights, soiling all of his furniture, eating all of his food and drinking all of his wine, making loud belching noises at every dinner, and chasing around after his daughters. But Midas put up with him for all of this time, and after 5 days, it was proven that he had passed the test set by Dionysus the god, and granted one boon. The god was grateful for the return of Selenos, and for the hospitality that he received, and to show his gratitude, he told Midas that he would grant him whatever he wanted. "You have only to name it," was the god's message. "Name your heart's desire." What treacherous words these were for mortal ears. With the voices of the soothsayers of his youth echoing in his mind, Midas did not hesitate. He had only one desire: gold. "I wish that everything I touch shall be turned to gold," he said. And Dionysus sighed. "Mortals," he thought to himself. "Are you sure this is what you want, Midas?" "Yes, that is what I want. You said I could have anything I wanted." He shakes his head again, and he says, "So be it. When you wake up tomorrow, that is what will happen." No sooner had he done this than the king's wish was granted. To try out his new skill, Midas reached down and tapped the sandals on his feet. In an instant, what had once been strips of leather were now a lattice of gold. He touched one of the palace walls. It too turned to gold. He went into the garden where his beloved roses grew, and he fingered the thornless stems. Gold. He stroked the leaves. Gold. Obviously, if they had turned to gold, they probably would have fallen off the stem, but this is godly magic. He caressed one of the blooms. Gold. His hand brushed a bee feeding on one of the flowers, and it too instantly mutated into a hard golden pellet that fell to the ground. He was a wizard, a magician, and soon he would be the richest in all of the world. Like a madman possessed, Midas tore around the palace, swooping on everything he could lay his hands on and transmuting it into gold with his alchemical touch. As dusk fell, Midas, exhausted but ecstatic, waited for his servants to bring him his usual meal, consisting of the sorts of delicacies that would tempt the jaded royal palate. His triumphs of the day had whetted his appetite, and he selected a particularly choice morsel of meat, redolent with spices and melting tender as butter. But no sooner had he touched it than he felt it harden under his fingertips. It was a lump of solid gold and totally inedible. He then tried to use cutlery, and when he raised it to his lips, the same thing happened. He let it fall with a clatter onto his plate. Next he reached out for a fat purple fig, its skin splitting to reveal the ripe pink flesh within. But as his hand closed on it, it became a gilded replica of itself. Perfect in every detail, but as useless as dry dust. And so it went with everything, and Midas tried to eat. Even the wine in his cup had changed into molten gold soup at the first sip. That night, for the first time in his life, Midas went to his bed hungry, and from now on, no matter how hard or ingeniously he tried to circumvent his alchemical powers, ordering his servants to feed him, or pecking at food speared on a stick, sucking up wine through a hollow reed, it was useless. Without nourishment, Midas began to waste away. Hollows sucked into his once chubby cheeks, and his round royal belly shrank. At last he realized what a man wants is not always what he needs. And so he went to the god Dionysus and begged him to remove the gift that he'd been given, which was really not a gift at all. Now, gods don't normally remove their gifts or their curses, but this was a reward for observing their rules and treating his servant very well. And so Dionysus this time was open to this idea. He said, "Go to the mountains, to the source of the river Patroclus." And said the god, "Bathe yourself in the fountainhead, and you will find yourself cleansed." And as Midas immersed himself in the cool, limpid waters of the spring, he saw a golden dust wash from his skin and float away on the current. His golden touch was gone, but it did not disappear altogether, for traces of it may still be found in the gold of the Patroclus River. The end.